Great. And so welcome everyone to CAISO and Wholeness and Justice's International Women's Day panel discussion for 2023. The title of our panel discussion today is Equitable Legal Protections for All Domestic Violence Survivors. My name is Angelique, and I am hosting today with Kellogg, and I now hand over to Kellogg, our Program and Research Officer, who will guide our discussion today.
Thank you so much, Angelique. Welcome, everyone. It's good to be here and sharing space with all of you. So essentially today, as Angelique said, the theme of this discussion is equitable legal protections for all domestic violence survivors, which is in keeping with the global theme for International Women's Day this year, which is embracing equity. The reason why we have chosen to focus on legal protections for all domestic violence survivors is because far too often we have realized in the work that we do as Wholeness and Justice that the data and response mechanisms which exist for domestic violence survivors aren't necessarily accessible to different groups of women who have been systematically placed at the margins. And these groups of women include LBTQI+ women, women with disabilities, migrant women, poor and low income women who are within the poor and low income strata. And so today we have a number of legal representatives from different organizations who work with groups of women who are vulnerable groups of women who will be presenting today just to sort of talk through their experiences as practitioners with domestic violence survivors, as well as talking through the Domestic Violence Act, which was recently amended in 2020, and providing recommendations based on their work and their experiences for the act. I was just reminded that I need to slow down, so I will slow down. I'm so sorry, everyone. Yeah, so that's why we're here today. And I hope that you all are ready to engage this discussion. It is an interactive session. So as Angelique mentioned earlier, there will be a question and answer segment towards the end of this evening's proceedings, and this will provide you with the opportunity to ask a question. We also have had a Microsoft form link that allowed folks to send in question anonymously. That will also be sent in the chat in case you're more comfortable sending in questions through that medium. And at the end of question and answer segment, we will be those questions will be raised. And so without further ado, we could begin with the panelists' presentations. The structure of the session today would include panelist presentations from the different representatives of the organizations. They would be essentially talking us through what their organization does and the kinds of work that they do with domestic violence survivors and vulnerable groups of women. And from that, we will have the discussion bits where we have a more open discussion among the panelists. As they talk through their experiences and the Domestic Violence Act. In that open discussion, the discussions would surround the complexity of the Domestic Violence Act, what access to protection looks like, and the process to accessing protection, as well as recommendations. And following that will be the question and answer segment. If you have any questions or anything you want to raise, you can always send it in the chat or send it through the Microsoft form link, and we will get to those during the question and answer segment. Thank you. The first panelist that will be presenting is Danielle Jones. Danielle Jones is the community lawyer at Wholeness and Justice, CAISO. She's been our community lawyer since December 2020, where she legally advises and represents members of the LGBTQIA community who have suffered human rights violations. Danielle was called to the bar in Trinidad and Tobago in October 2008. She has a very well-rounded practice and specializes in criminal law, family law, and civil litigation. She believes in volunteerism and offers her services at a number of civil society groups. Danielle is passionate about obtaining equality of treatment for all persons despite creed, race, class, or nationality. Danielle, we hand over to you.
Thank you, Kellogg. Hi, everyone. So I am the community lawyer at Wholeness and Justice. So the services that we provide are for members of the LGBTQIA community who have suffered violations. Violations could be as a result of someone doing something to you, or a certain part of an institution that has failed to provide a service to you or give you poor service. I would assist members, clients that come to our program with lodging police reports, lodging police complaints, filing applications for protection orders, and which is in that filing of application for protection order, women who have children and independence, I will also file for custody, maintenance, access. And through Wholeness and Justice program, we represent what I must highlight is trans women. The amendment provides that someone who is in a relationship, domestic relationship, can apply for those protection orders, as well as for those who suffer a violation that is not domestic violence, but is gender-based violence, say for instance, harassment, stalking, those general things. We'll help you file your criminal complaint. So the work at Wholeness and Justice, that's my aspect, the legal aspect, and we try to walk you through. So even if it is that there's no direct legal service that you need, we give you the support so that you'll be able to understand. Say, for instance, you get a legal document, you don't understand it, we do the consultation and we guide you through it. There's also the clinical arm, which provides the psychosocial support, the therapy, the counseling to help the survivor overcome the trauma that they have suffered, and also to prepare them for the legal process, because we all know that reliving the same incident that you went through is very traumatic, and that is what the clinical arm does. Then we have the wholeness. The wholeness is helping the survivor navigate life. So providing them with the emotional support, the fun activities to give them skills, critical skills that they become employable, food support for those who are not employed and have no means of getting their basic needs. Thank you. Next slide, please. In terms of the challenges that I have encountered through the Wholeness and Justice program, gender inequality, especially for women, trans women, lesbian women, poor women in particular, they suffer because going to the police station is also a traumatic experience for someone who is a trans woman, because of course, in some instances, and I want to stress some, they are ridiculed. So you have underreporting. So what we do is accompany them to the police station as far as possible, or just to make them comfortable, to just guide them through the clinical support. There's also a lack of accountability. So you lodge a police complaint against be getting poor service. You don't know that complaint process could go on forever. There's also the sensitivity that the persons who provide the service, they lack. Not all police officers, not all social workers, not all mediators, not all counselors are sensitive to the particular need, because it must be specific to that particular survivor. So an officer must always be willing to listen, ask pertinent questions. You're not there to ridicule, you're not there to judge. Similarly with guidance officers, counselors, and so you're there to listen, find the problem, and create a plan for problem solving for that particular individual. So we need to have persons, not that they have the skills sometimes, we need to let them ensure that they have the skills all the time. So every time that a survivor attends to one of these service providers, they get the deserved service that they need. There's also weak coordination and monitoring. So there's a need for all service providers and stakeholders it's supposed to be like a well-oiled machine. So if I suffer a violation, I go to the police station. The police tell you go to the hospital. At the hospital, the doctors is aware of how they will deal with survivors who have suffered injury, and then guide them, take this little slip back to the police station and let the officer come and collect your medical report. Then the lawyer, you get the lawyer guide you through the process so that you have someone who is there to provide that support, so that it mustn't be that the lawyer have to ensure that the police report is made, that the medical, what is stated, blunt force trauma, so it's specifically stated, and not something like alleged domestic violence, because I've seen that on medical reports and that's not what's supposed to be there. So each stakeholder must work like us in sync. It's a link in a chain. Every link must be connected. In terms of the insufficiency of data, in particular against members of the LGBTQIA community, because there's a lack of reporting, the manner in which data is collected, there's not enough systems in place so that the data could be collected, so that we could know what is the problem, so that we could look at the system and change it to adjust so that every single survivor would be able to access justice. And the main brunt, last but not least, number 6, housing. All victims across the board, all women suffer this need for housing, because most times they are running from the perpetrator, leaving behind their comfort zone where they live, most of them not employed, don't have a means of gaining employment, and immediate means of gaining employment, because again, if you get rent, you have to pay a month in, then in 2 months, the first month, first and last, and then you have to provide for yourself. So there's a need for housing. Some housing for in other stakeholders, for survivors of the heterosexual grouping. However, with respect to trans women, there's no real housing in place, or even housing grants or funding temporarily to assist them when they are in need of housing. This is the end of my presentation. Yes.
Thank you so much, Danielle. There's much to discuss there. And so we are going to move to our second presenter, who is representing. I'm pulling everything up. I'm so sorry. Yes, who's representing the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, commonly known as WINAD. We're very pleased to have Alicia Manakar with us, who has a very long and exciting bio. I'm going to give you the highlights, and if we can get Alicia up on video, please. Alicia is an attorney at law, having obtained her Bachelor's of Law from the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and Legal Education Certificate from Hugh Wooding Law School. Originally from India, Alicia has lived in Saudi Arabia and Africa before settling in Trinidad and Tobago. She's a national scholar, having native fluency in Hindi and Marathi, and professional proficiency in French and Spanish. She's currently practicing law at K.R. Lala and Company. Before that, she was employed with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, and now Living Water Community, where she's able to assist migrants and refugees with a broad range of legal issues. She's particularly passionate about human rights and intellectual property law, and she now serves as the legal director of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, which is focused on eliminating domestic and gender-based violence. We're really happy to have you here with us. Oh, great.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for that introduction. I am here on behalf of the Women's Institute for Alternative Development, WINAD, and we are a NGO who is geared towards social consciousness and advocacy for gender-based violence and domestic violence, and assisting women and girls with mentorship programs as well, enabling girls to explore and embrace alternative relationships and leaderships and navigate the world of work, and just provide a social network for young women and girls to embody, their best selves, and hopefully we'll be able to establish advocacy, sensitization, and ensure that women feel strong in their identities. Our work is geared towards establishing not just legal assistance towards women, but psychosocial support, as well as providing food, any kind of financial assistance throughout our various programs, social media advocacy, and just ensuring that women and girls feel comfortable in their own skin. And one of the projects that I'm responsible for personally is our collaboration with the Pan American Development Foundation, which is entitled Protecting the Legal Rights and Enhancing the Lives of Venezuelan Migrants in Trinidad and Tobago. With this project, we are able to assist a certain number of Venezuelan migrants, both women and men. However, our demographic tends to be more women-centered. We engage in legal representation for domestic violence victims, gender-based violence victims, where we are a team of around 38 attorneys at law, all of them volunteering their time and services at very subsidized rates. And we engage in applying for applications for protection orders, custody, maintenance, immigration matters as well, drafting legal letters, pre-action protocol documents, affidavits, registration documents. We even provide support for landlord-tenant disputes, or even counseling services for couples who may be, engaged in domestic violence situations, and provide general legal advice and consultations as well. And our team of attorneys is actually very kind. Sometimes they even end up representing our Venezuelan migrants outside the scope of the project and are able to assist them beyond just the domestic violence life cycle. So they're able to take on matters in their personal capacity completely pro bono. And these here are some graphics that we have promoting our projects, and we pride ourselves in our interpreters who are very kind to allow their time and engage in translating every single consultation, conversation with the attorneys, and we even outsource translation for legal documents, which is something that's very hard to get our hands on, but we are able to be assisted with funding from Pan American Development Foundation to be able to achieve our goals. We often have a lot of women not feeling comfortable to come forward as they are Venezuelan migrants because of the pervasive language barrier that exists in Trinidad and Tobago, where law enforcement and attorneys are often not able to communicate with their clients. So I have to mention all of the interpreters. Advocacy. So like I mentioned, we also, with our team of 38 attorneys, are able to conduct pro bono legal clinics throughout Trinidad and Tobago, providing legal advice to women and girls of domestic and gender-based violence, and we're able to educate victims on what recourses they have, even beyond the law, just in relation to how they're able to get control of their lives after they've been victims of domestic violence. We also hope to reach a large population of girls and teens to not be encouraged to enter into economic relationships and excuse me, and disadvantage themselves, and that they have an opportunity beyond just entering into an economic relationship for their future. We also conduct workshops regarding gender disinformation and social media, as oftentimes gender disinformation is a precursor to perpetuating domestic violence. We speak about topics such as censorship of carnival music, which is often a precursor to perpetuating domestic violence, and hope to gain some sensitization of such topics. WINAD is also invited to join GenSAC, which is a community of reducing armed violence, which is very important in a country like Trinidad and Tobago, where we have a large number of illegal firearms. WINAD's experiences and challenges supporting domestic violence victims is actually not very unique. It is possibly what my other fellow presenters are also mirroring, which is that migrant women are very hesitant to go to the courts and access justice, as they often fear that their immigration status will be the focus of their reporting, rather than the mere fact that they have been abused. Another issue that we have faced is that there is no recourse in the law for Trinidadian nationals, often men perpetrating violence against women, to not use their immigration status as a tool against them. We also at WINAD have seen that women are not inherently vulnerable, and what we mean by this is that women are not inherently weak, which is something that has been perpetuated by society and often by culture. As we assisting the vulnerable migrant population, it's rooted deeply in their Latin culture, where they have very stereotypical gender norms. They do view themselves as inherently weak because of the fact that they are women. And we often also have experienced police not being aware that someone is still entitled to the best protection of the law despite their immigration status, as police are more concerned with that status rather than protecting them, and will often report these migrants to the immigration division rather than prosecute their domestic violence report. So I do believe that there is some reform required for the police to be educated on such matters as well. Have the next slide, please. And so we at WINAD, I'm seeing a question in the box here, if we have room for voluntary services. Yes, of course, we will always welcome any volunteerism, and you can reach us at our various social media pages. Of course, send us an email and just reach out to us as to how you'd like to volunteer. We're always welcoming new members, and please promote our legal program, as this is a clinic and program that is free of cost to the migrants, and we are always open to taking on more clients and assisting more women. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Alicia, for that. Yeah, let's definitely get at WINAD for volunteerism and any other questions that you have. Just a reminder that you could send your questions in the chat box, and during the question and answer segment, we will raise those questions as well. And we will also send the Microsoft link as well in the chat box, so you could send questions in there if you feel more comfortable posing a question anonymously. Moving swiftly along through our panelist presentations, the next person that would be presenting is Ganesh Rampasad. Ganesh is an attorney at law in practice, has been since 2018 in Trinidad and Tobago. He holds a bachelor's of degree from the University of the West Indies and postgraduate LEC from the Hugh Wooden Law School, Trinidad. Prior to his recruitment at the Living Water community, he was in private practice with leading law chambers, working as instructing and advocate attorney in criminal and civil litigation, including constitutional rights-based claims, judicial review, industrial relations, and family and child law. His work with national NGOs and in India propelled him to pursue a career in humanitarian aid work at a larger scale with the Living Water community and its UN donors, responding to the Venezuelan migration crisis. He leads a refugee legal aid program funded by the UNHCR Trinidad and implemented by the Living Water community. As a humanitarian aid professional, the work has taken him to Geneva, Switzerland, where he received training in strategic litigation for refugees in countries without domestic refugee legislation. Ganesh will present on his work with Living Waters and experiences with vulnerable groups of women. Ganesh, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kellogg. And thank you for having me on this very special day for women. On behalf of the Living Water community, we are very happy to present our work on the protection of women, both local and women belonging to the migrant community. So the Living Water community, I'll go right ahead, was founded by Miss Rhonda Mingo, and it's a Catholic regional NGO founded in 1975. Our coordinator for the Ministry for Migrants and Refugees is Miss Rochelle Naked. And the community itself is a cadre of several different types of ministries, pastoral, communication, and social ministries. The Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, which I belong to, is one of the 14 ministries at which we serve both the local and migrant population, but more so the migrant population. These are some of the social ministries we have: the Ave Maria Caring Center, Eye Clinic, the Bethany House Food Bank, Wheelchair Ministry, the Maximilian Kobe Cancer Hospice, and our Ministry for Migrants and Refugees. And this is the location. This is an actual picture of where the head office is located: Corner Gordon and Frederick Street. So the Ministry for Migrants and Refugees, specifically, I wanted to talk a little bit about the services that we provide. We do registration or pre-registration for asylum seekers and refugees. And for the purposes of this session, we do case management for gender-based violence survivors. So you'd see here, we have a case planning and management team. We do assessments, and specifically for women coming to us indicating that they would have been survivors of gender-based violence or sexual violence. We would do assessments in terms of health, legal aid, and housing. Now, our program specifically for domestic violence is funded by the Pan American Development Foundation and the UNHCR. Now, the funding with the Pan American Development Foundation was a program, I would say, that was a bit more robust last year as opposed to this year, because of the Ukrainian crisis, as well as the recent earthquake in Turkey. This has caused some gaps in funding, and we have ceased operations with respect to shelter and certain care packages that we would have given to the survivors of domestic violence. So what we would have had to do is to find other sources of funding to support with that need, because that has been ongoing. And in fact, every week or so, we do have persons reporting and coming to us indicating that they have been survivors or victims of domestic violence. All right. Our main funder, though, right now is the UNHCR, and we have always been funded for several years under this program. And they would provide, through our legal assistance program, funding to support with legal counseling and assistance. Just like WINAD, we also have psychosocial services, in-house adult counselors, as well as child guidance counselors, and they're all bilingual. And we have an education team. So when a survivor of domestic violence come to our care, we would do a robust legal assistance assessment, as well as a social assistance assessment. And when we see that they would have had a child or children in the relationship, sometimes, especially with the migrant community, we would often realize that they would not be within the public education system. So we have a school, which is called a virtual school. It's called Equal Place, and that's funded by the UNICEF. So we would do an assessment and have those children register to be enrolled in those schools. So the program itself, it is holistic, I would say, and we do take each survivor as they are, meaning that when they come, as I said before, there's going to be a very holistic assessment as to their immediate vulnerabilities and needs. So if we see that there's an education need for the children, they will get that immediate need, as well as psychosocial assistance, referrals, health, and of course, legal counseling. Now, the legal counseling, we have our own legal program, just like WINAD. However, we assist both Venezuelans and non-Venezuelan persons, migrants. So yes, the Venezuelan population is the largest population that we serve. Second to that is the Cubans. And the third to that, we find the migrants coming from countries like Syria, Jamaica, as well as 35 other countries from around the world. So we do serve a large number of women, particularly, and also victims of trafficking. So we would make those referrals, though, to the counter-trafficking unit. We have a referral pathway with WINAD, where we would refer Venezuelan nationals to get further assistance. So what we would do is do our legal counseling. We would interview those persons, and we have our pro bono attorneys as well. In fact, Danielle is one of our attorneys on our pro bono panel, and we often send applications for her to file protection orders. So when those protection orders are filed, we will support with the interpretation, the initial legal counseling, which I would do, as well as another in-house attorney, housed here at Living Water. And then we would support with the general legal case management up to where a magistrate takes conduct of the matter. So with the PADF, as I said before, we would have had a shelter program, but that has now closed because of lack of some funding. So we continue to liaise with the gender-based violence units as to when those cases come to us, we would collaborate with them. I think Danielle was making the point that it's a symbiotic relationship with all these necessary stakeholders. And this is important because gender-based violence is really everybody's business. it's the NGOs, it's the public sector as well as the private sector. So it's important to establish a good relationship with the gender-based violence unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And we have done that several years ago when it was first conceptualized, so that the referral to them, and they can also make referrals to us in terms of housing and emergency housing when it was available for the migrant community. And we would have often provided interpretation support as well for those victims or those survivors who are from the migrant community. In fact, the victim and witness support unit of the TTPS, when a survivor of domestic violence or a survivor of a crime in Trinidad and Tobago is referred to the victim and witness support unit, because of some language barrier, which I suppose will take us to these specific challenges. Because of those barriers, they will refer those cases to our counselors who are bilingual. Our adult counselor is from Argentina. She works remotely, and we make those referrals to her and deal with it internally. Right? So So I wanted to focus on the common legal protection concerns, because why is that important? That is important because it is the start of the many specific challenges faced by the migrant community, as well as specifically this vulnerable group of persons being survivors of domestic violence. Because as migrants, but also as survivors of domestic violence or gender-based violence, they are subjected to all of these protection concerns, what we call protection concerns in the international sphere and in the humanitarian aid sphere. Many times, well, their situation is such that they are all irregular, they're considered irregular. From the minute they enter Trinidad and Tobago, they've overstayed, or they would have entered a port illegally or irregularly. So that has actually created its own barrier or challenges with respect to how they feel in approaching the police service and getting support from the authorities and even the court system. So there's a general fear of the police and the authorities and intimidation of the court system. Now, I speak about the migrant community, yes, but I see maybe 50% of or more persons attending here, not right now, are from the local population, Trinidad and Tobago. Because intimidation is something we realize, even when I was in private practice, I realized, and Donna will probably say the same thing as well as Elisha, the local population, we all have a fear of the court system. It's a scary place to be in. So why would I make an application on my own if I recognize or identify I'm being abused? So there's a general intimidation of fear that you know something will happen, and the court system is such a dark place. So what we've done is that we interview those persons. They come to us, we sit them down, and we actually have an in-person counseling session, legal counseling session with them. So it's done in a different way as in a regular office, where we have to be aware of their specific needs and vulnerabilities and explain to them, take the time to explain to them how the court system actually operates. Many times we have to explain that it's a magistrate, what is a magistrate, what it means to file a protection order, and what are the protections afforded to them. Now, it's never a perfect solution, because the law can only go so far in avoiding further violence. Yes, you will get orders, but at the end of the day, what we've seen is that many times the survivor would be required to take some responsibility as well. So many times, if the court cannot make an order on time to exclude the perpetrator from the house, that survivor must find an alternative temporary place of accommodation while an order or a permanent order is being settled. So, for example, we would have had a case this week where we dealt with a migrant, and she had a place to go, which was by her brother's place, but she had a concern about leaving the child because the father would have taken custody of this child. So she was afraid to even leave the home, although she was being abused. And we're talking about financial, physical, emotional, and mental abuse. So we would have had to deal with this case very carefully and intricately. The attorney would have come here, taken instructions, used our interpreter, and then the court matter would have been yesterday virtually. So the court, however, had not made an order because of service, and service we found is also an issue because many times the migrants specifically, they may not be fully aware of the address. So that's something we try to encourage amongst the population, to know where you are living, find a bill, understand that having a specific address is important. So when you are making reports like this, it is easier to serve what we call the summons so that the perpetrator can answer those allegations, you know. We found the language barrier and communication is also a big challenge, which is, I would say, increasing the fear in going to the police. And often they would say they are being refused when they go to police to make a report. And I would take you to this TTPS mobile app because we often advise them to use this app if it is that you are afraid or there's a language barrier you feel you may not be able to overcome. And this app is so great, I would say, because it allows a non-English speaking person to make a report in Spanish, and the receipt will be sent in Spanish. And also there's an SOS function, which is this red button here on the app. You can see. We can use it, the migrant population can use it if there is an emergency. And my understanding is that the gender-based violence unit in every police station is trained to respond immediately in cases like this, whether it's an SOS function or they would have indicated they are a victim of domestic violence. So these are the general challenges, I would say. It's not a perfect solution, but we continue to work with the population, with stakeholders, with the private sector, with the police, as we do trainings on a monthly basis to ensure that the protection environment for domestic violence survivors is a little bit better every day. Okay, and I would leave you with my contact information. Our contact information is this. It's infospot.org, where you can find all of our information, as well as this is our main office number and our email address. We have a hotline which came out recently. I will share on the chat. If you know any migrants or you are a migrant yourself, you can call this number. It's toll free, and you can seek our assistance. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that very robust presentation, Ganesh. CADV was not able to attend today's session due to some scheduling conflicts, but they did send a statement about their services. So Angelique will just read that briefly, and then we will continue with the proceedings.
Thank you, Kellogg. Sharing on behalf of the Coalition Against Domestic Violence, which works to combat domestic abuse and other forms of gender-based violence through advocacy, training, and public awareness. They wanted us to share with you all today that their services include psychosocial support and case management. They provide free psychosocial support in the form of assessment, crisis interventions, and specific support, including referral to relevant services, to persons who have been affected or may become victims of domestic violence, as well as perpetrators who wish to stop their abusive behavior. These services include working with couples, working with young people, and psychoeducational interventions in community settings. And these are also available to the clients of all member organizations. CADV is a member organization, and I believe a number of our groups here and organizations would be members of the coalition. CADV's psychosocial interventions are carried out by their staff and volunteers under the supervision of a team of qualified professionals. Additionally, CADV offers free legal advisory referral services through attorneys by providing pro bono services. And so that is the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. You can find their information. They have a website. They're also on all the social medias. And we will add that information in the chat for our records and for folks who don't know or aren't aware of CADV's services. Kellogg, back over to you.
Thank you so much. And now we're moving into our discussion segment. Throughout our panelists' presentations, they would have mentioned domestic violence and abuse and all these things. But I wanted to ask the panelists, at least firstly, to clarify what the types of abuse that exist under the legislation, and maybe draw from some examples of how some of those types of abuses affect your service population, as well as the legal protections that are available through the legislation for these abuse. So.
Yeah, I could take this question, right? So types of abuse, physical abuse, if you actually make contact with someone, or even if you just fist the person and actually don't make contact with them, that is with that person, that is physical abuse. Verbal abuse, using obscene language, threats, violent words. In terms of emotional and psychological abuse, that affects your mind, how you feel about yourself. So if I tell you you're black, you're ugly, or you're stupid, you can't amount to nothing, those types, it plays on your mind, and then you have a negative thoughts about yourself, that you can't rise above, or you're just not worth, you don't worth anything, right? There's also financial abuse. So financial abuse is if it is you are the person who stays home and cares for, and the other person is the provider, and that person gives you a credit card to use, give you a bank account with deposit $500 a month, and then a day they just come and say, give me back the card, give me back the money, nothing for you. And then every 3 months or every 6 months, give you $100. Another form of financial abuse is restricting you from working. So you met the person, they tell you, I go provide for you, stay home, I go see about you and the children. And you give up your job as a Korean woman, I would say, because this is International Women's Day. And we take it from you. So you do it because, you know, you want to be there for the child. You want to care for the child. You want to see every little waking moment of the child. And then eventually you decide that you want to go back out to work. And the person say, your place is in the house. That decision of you, whether you're working or not, you don't want to work, that's your personal decision that you have to make. But if the other person is dictating your pace, that is also financial abuse. Or they say, when you're actually working, you either withdraw that money and bring it home for them, or give them your card, or they keep your bank card all the time. Those are forms of financial abuse. So those are the types of abuse. Kellogg, I can't remember the other question.
That's okay. Thank you so much for that. My other question was in relation to legal protections. So you've identified the different types of abuse, but what legal protections exist? In your presentation, you spoke a lot about trans women and in garnishes. You mentioned, well, migrant women. So my curiosity is with regards to the legislation. Does it have any specific, or are there provisions that allow trans women, migrant women, these different groups of vulnerable women to access protection through the legislation, or are they just left at the wayside?
Right. So I will deal with the trans women, right? Because prior to the amendment of 2020, persons in same-sex relationships could not have access protection orders. You had to be a heterosexual couple. Now, with the amendment of 2020, Section 3 has a definition of what is a domestic relationship. And well, they give the usual husband, wife, cohabitant, spouse, child, and so on. But there's a particular amendment that says a person who is or was in a relationship with the respondent. Respondent is just the name. So the applicant is the survivor, the respondent is the perpetrator. So if you were in a relationship with your perpetrator, it could be a visiting relationship or a dating relationship. And by virtue of that amendment, same-sex persons can apply and get a protection order once there's domestic violence, right?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Thank you, Danielle. And Ganesh, in relation to migrant women, what's the state of the law in terms of them being able to access legal protection for domestic violence?
Yeah, so I realized I didn't focus much on that, but that is because what is interesting about the Domestic Violence Act and the court system is that it allows full access to the court system for migrant women. So while they may be irregular or illegal as to their immigration status, the court doesn't concern itself about their status. What it concerns itself with is the abuse. If it falls within the protections under the Act, they can access the courts, which is a great thing. It means we can do more work in this field, which is why we take referrals. We set up attorneys who file applications. We make referrals to WINAD, to the Legal Aid Advisory Authority. And there are many migrant women who benefit from protection orders. Yeah, as I said, just yesterday, we had a court matter. The magistrate heard the matter. No questions are asked about the person's legal status.
All right, thank you for that. This question is for Elisha. Could you give some insight as to what legal protection under the Domestic Violence Act looks like? Like, what are examples of legal protections?
So legal protections under the Domestic Violence Act can range from protection orders, even orders stopping the perpetrator of the abuse from coming into contact with areas of your place of work, your residence, your children, coming into contact with your children's school, even not frequenting any legally shared property, matrimonial homes, or the home where you and your partner would be living at. Also, the Domestic Violence Act Amendment of 2020 expands the scope as well of financial abuse, even mental abuse, emotional abuse, verbal abuse, a wide range of psychological forms of abuse are now captured, and there is a broader scope that is available under the Domestic Violence Act in terms of legal protections. So, I mean, the major one is, of course, the protection of the protection order, which is essentially almost like a restraining order, as they like to say in popular culture. But I think lots of the focus for migrant women, which WINAD deals with, is the children, because oftentimes children are born to migrant women in Trinidad who become Trinidadian citizens, and their father often use them as a weapon against against them. So that's a little summary of what legal protections are offered under the Act.
Thank you for that. So we've talked about the types of abuse. We talked about the legal protections that exist. I want us to delve into a little bit into who can apply for a protection order, or who can apply for someone to receive protection. I know that I know that in some instances, some people may not even recognize that they're being abused, or even when they do know that they're being abused for whatever reason, they may be more inclined to not do anything regarding that. But it doesn't change the fact that, you know, the person is being abused. So I guess my question is really about the responsibility. Whose responsibility is it then to take this or to apply for a protection order for someone who's being abused?
All right, so a number of persons could apply for protection order. So once the applicant is of sound mind, they can make their application on their own behalf, as well as, and not only, I know we're focusing on women, but not only in intimate relationships. So even if you're subject to violence from a family member, so your mommy, your daddy, relative, they have a broad, your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, your uncle-in-law, all the in-laws, cousins, nephew. So there's a long, wide range. Before, it was a very limited range, and there was a definition of members of the household. So you had to be sharing the same kitchen, same bathroom for it to be considered a household. However, with this amendment, it expands, because, you know, in Trinidad and maybe the Caribbean, there are a number of extended families. So one house could have like 5 households. So prior to the amendment, if someone would have approached and somebody from the upstairs interfering with someone from the downstairs, you would not have been able to be successful in applying for a protection order. But now we don't have that issue. There also a very important section in section 19A. A police officer of the rank of assistant superintendent or above could apply, make an emergency application. And even if that is like 12 o'clock in the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, court closed, they could call, make arrangements to have a judicial officer called out to set as an emergency application. But it must be in situation where the person has suffered severe harm, or it is likely to suffer severe physical harm. So then the magistrate will set. This section was in particularly used a lot during the COVID pandemic, and I think it's a remarkable section, I think there's a need for an extension of this, not only in those circumstances, because sometimes you get a survivor coming to you after 4 p.m. and if you send it, you can't get them until the next morning. So I think that it shouldn't just only be a police officer to the rank of assistant superintendent. And I think that's something we could revisit if Parliament is reconsidering further amendments, as well as social workers, Children's Authority could make applications for protection order. So if you have a survivor who, due to the traumatic experience, is unable to apply on their own behalf, the Children's Authority could do so. Of course, if there are children involved, there's also the social workers. They outline who could apply, and even a regular police officer could apply for a protection order on behalf of that person. But of course, to get over the legal hurdles, you'll have to present a report that the person is not in a mental capacity to deal with the situation due to the trauma, or that the person is hospitalized, right? So those documents. Kellogg, I hope I have answered that.
Kellogg, I just wanted to ask Danielle, could you tell them a bit about the domestic violence hotline of the judiciary that the judiciary has? Because you spoke about being able to access the judiciary, the courts at odd hours of the night.
Right. So during, they're not so efficient these days, because I think in COVID it was faster, but now they answer the next morning. So you could send an email to the dv@ttlawcourt.org, courts.org, or domesticviolence.response@ttlawcourts.org, as well as you could call 866 DVCT, and that is 3828. And those are the emergency contacts for the judiciary. There are also emergency contacts for the gender-based violence unit, and we have the TTPS app. We have the web version, as well as the app that you can download from your Play Store or your Apple Store. You could go into any of the divisional offices of the gender-based violence units. There's one in Carnage, there's one in Maloney Police Station. I believe Labre is the southern branch, and Chagonas is the central. And of course, well, Tobago has theirs, I believe, at Sherburne Police Station, Sherburne Road Police Station. And there you will meet specialist officers who are handpicked by their head assistant superintendent, Ms. Claire Guy Allen, who I don't know where she gets the energy to assist survivors. It's like she's up 24/7, but she's someone who you could call on and has always assisted victims and will go above and beyond. And it's not just her, she and her team. When they established the gender-based violence unit in March 2020, these officers worked 8 to 4. Now they have a shift system. So now the majority of them will be between 8 to 4, and now they have a night person, so that they're expanding their services to ensure that you are covered. The survivors are covered. The officers, if they are not there, they call police stations every morning outside of the divisions to find out any domestic violence reports reported during the course of the night, and they will follow up with the victim. They also were survivor. They also walk them through the victim and witness support for those that need immediate psychosocial support. They have an amazing team of counselors at the victim support unit. Miss Corby and her team, shout out to them. They work, I don't know how they do it, but they do. And it's bringing a lot of results. I just want to mention that back in the day, you had to specifically make an application for a protection order for a child. So if a mother has suffered domestic violence and the child has suffered domestic violence, you had to make 2 separate applications on behalf of the mother, on behalf of herself, and on behalf of the minor. Now, it is automatic that once a protection order is given to the mother, it automatically applies to any child that is in per care, so that there's no need for 2 applications, unless of course it does not specifically relate to a child. It will then expressly state that. So we are making a lot of progress. There's still room for improvement, but that's the ways in which we could make application. Kellogg, I just want to say one more thing in terms of going to the court to file your protection orders, right? You know, in the olden days, you could just walk to the court and make your application. I don't think it's possible at some courts, because some courts are closed, but in some remote areas, they are open, and there are security guards who will assist anyone who comes there for assistance. But you really have to call the court or send an email. So for persons who don't know, please call a number and you could refer. You could go to the police station. You can ask. If you don't have a device, there are ways and means of getting your application filed. So get familiar with all the court emails. So if you live in Tunapuna, it will be mrcc.tunapuna@ttlawcourts.org. If you live Sangre Grande, it will be mrcc.sangregrande@ttlawcourts.org. Of course, I will send this information so that you all can get familiar with. And if you live in Port of Spain, Tobago, or Princestown, you'll have to go to the family courts, which will be Princestown Family Court, the Port of Spain Family Court, and the Tobago Family Court. And in Tobago, it's specific, just as in Port of Spain, if it touches and concerns children and out of a family situation, they will send it to the Tobago Family Court. If it's just you and your partner without any children involved, it will go to the Scarborough District Court. So it will be mrcc.tobago@ttlawcourts.org. So if you Google it, there are lots of Facebook. I know people are more on Facebook, and so you could search the court. You just need to type in the particular court. And if you can, please go to any police station for assistance, or you could call any of the numbers of any of the organizations that are here so that you could get assistance, or anyone you know could get assistance.
Hi, everyone. We are running up on time, so I just wanted to acknowledge that we have a bit more for our program. So if we can ask folks to stay on for about an additional 10 minutes so that we can get to our Q&A, that would be great. I know that Stephen had a question, and I want to acknowledge that before we move too quickly. Stephen, are you okay, great.
Okay. Good night. Yeah. Okay. Good night, everyone. I want to say that I enjoyed all of the presentations. They were all very good. And now I've been thinking a lot about the deaf community and their experiences of GBV. Danielle was saying, about the emergency hotlines. I want to say, how could deaf people communicate? Is there a text option? It's really important for deaf people to have access in any emergency situations, but I don't know how we would be able to do that. That's something I've been thinking about, and I wanted to ask you.
Hi, Stephen. Through emails, I think the only I don't think they really thought of the deaf community. I don't want to say it like that because it's not intentional, but you can access the court via email as well as from the app for the TTPS. There's a specific link on the app for the gender-based violence unit, as well as to any police station. So, and I believe, I'm not sure if I can remember, but they also take voice notes. It may not be, if you have someone who you have a friend that you could communicate your report to, and that person could send the voice note to the TTPS app, you can be assisted. As well as you can come to any one of these NGOs here, as well as you could reach out to me or anyone and Johanna so that we could assist. You have given me something to think about, and I would definitely raise this at the other meetings concerning the deaf community. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. We have to give a shout out to our Sign Together class and Joanna and Selena and the work that we are doing. CAISO has embarked on a over a year-long process now of learning and teaching Trinidad and Tobago Sign Language with a group of, we started with a large group of people, and we've had 14, I believe 14 people graduate up to sign language level 3, members of the LGBTQ plus community, as well as folks who are service providers, in an effort to do just that. If we say we're going to be accessible, what does that look like in practice? And yes, it's hard work and it's extra work, but it is absolutely needed. And so I just had to say that as an example. It's still a work in progress. We're still learning, and having deaf community with us to hold us accountable and to think through that together is so important. And so we are going to beg you for 15 more minutes, I think. And I know that Selena has been going for a while, so just, Selena, let us know if you're okay to keep going. I want to make sure you're okay. Okay. Okay, good. So we have one more question for our panelists for quick discussion before we move to sharing some of the Q&A from our community members and audience who shared those questions with us. We've talked a lot about what is available, how you can access protection. And one of our highlights, of course, is we've infused throughout, and all of our presenters have shared some of the challenges our organizations experience when trying to support survivors, when trying to help members of our community, in particular communities, in particular those most vulnerable. We particularly want to talk today and ask each of you if you can identify some of the gaps, if there's one or two things that you specifically say we absolutely need to create change around, we need stronger and better legislation. These are the gaps in the law. How do we address that specifically? If each of you can just share quickly, what is your main recommendation? What is your main, what attention do we need to draw for legal protections? Because we know that there's still a lot of gaps. And so I would like to start with, I'm trying to see if everyone is here. Can we start with Ganesh? Yes, I'm calling you on you.
Yes. I mean, I would speak to the migrant community. I would say the language barrier is one of the greatest challenges of it all. together with lack of immigration status. So I would like to see the legislation state specifically the establishment of an interpretation unit, perhaps within the TTPS, and that is also attached to the judiciary. I think that is lacking because that has caused some delay in swift treatment or orders when domestic violence applications are filed. So that is what I would like to see.
Thank you so much. And perhaps we can also add sign interpretation to that as well.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, it seems like, you know, we definitely need that. And I think that's something we should all be advocating for, whether or not it's a community that we serve or not. We should be advocating and working towards inclusion for all. And that's one of our goals today, is to really think deeply together how we do that. Danielle? What is the one recommendation you want us to what is the one gap that you think still needs immediate attention for protection, for access to protection?
Judging, like, I think the fact that we judge everyone's lifestyle based on our idiosyncrasies, how we were raised, and so I think it's a barrier because survivors don't come forward, which is from my work and my experience, especially with, and it crossed the board, trans women, migrant women. It's because you think that, and those who are come from a religious background, there's a big hurdle. And most of the time, some survivors either remain, or even if they get out, they go back. So as an attorney doing this work for almost 15 years, the main issue when I just came out, I used to be vexed when I spend so much time in getting this protection order for you and whatever, and next 2 minutes you go back with your partner, and then the partner watching me hard on the street when I pass in, you know, and those kind of thing I took personally. But then understanding the intricacies of why they went back, some of them is because of religion, is what their family expects of them financially, so that if we judge less, victims will come. The main reason why trans women don't come forward to make reports and they suffer a lot of violence is because of the experience that they get at the police station. They are ridiculed, photos of them at the station circulating. So I just want the judging to end so that persons could really come out and get out of it.
And greater support in that whole process. And that's one of the reasons why we started Wholeness and Justice. And Danielle, you've been such a vital part of that process, is that we try to help be that mediator and navigate those services for our clients. And the fact is too that, you know, queer folks are also experiencing different kinds of violence within homes too. We are also dealing with that very issue. Alicia, would you like to share, please? Oh.
Sorry. So I still think that education and advocacy is necessary, sensitization, especially training of police to deal with especially migrant women, even the deaf community, disabled community. We don't really listen and we don't really judge, like Danielle said, everyone fairly and equally. And I think a lot of that has to do with sensitization and education, especially with a lot of xenophobia towards migrant women, focusing on their immigration status rather than what they're going through. Those kinds of things, I think, can be worked out if we learn to implement training of not just law enforcement officers, the judiciary, the migrants themselves who don't know their rights. I think we would be in a much better place.
Thank you so much. And now we turn over to Kellogg to share some of the questions that have come up. We invited, as Kellogg shared earlier, we invited members of our communities, the public, and we've shared across our networks the call for, what are your questions about domestic violence, about the Domestic Violence Act? And so Kellogg will share a few of those now.
Thank you so much, Angelique. We've had a number of questions, but because of time constraints, we won't be able to go through all. So I just picked out some of the questions that sort of follow up on the conversation that has been had today. One of them being, what comes after the end of a protection order? Daniel, I don't know if you want to respond to this.
What comes at the end of a protection order? When you get your protection order, the survivor gets it. The court will send, because now it's email, send it to you. You print 3 copies. Well, I should correct that. Some courts send it directly to the gender-based violence office, and the gender-based violence office does the service on the perpetrator. And they send a copy for you, which you are to print and to keep on your person. And I would suggest to print like 3 copies. You leave one in your vehicle, you leave one in your handbag, and you leave one in your house, right? You can even leave one on work, right? I still tell my survivors to print 2 copies and deliver it to the police station nearest to your workplace and to where you live. Because the place that you work may not be the same place that you live. And we all know that the perpetrator at times go above and beyond to get access to the victim. I advise survivors that this phrase that protection order is a piece of paper, it really, really gets me annoyed, because it's a piece of paper, yes, but that piece of paper has saved a number of women. Of course, we hear on the news those who died, even though they had a protection order, which is unfortunate, but we don't hear the stories of how many women survived because of that said piece of paper. So I would tell you, it's better to have the piece of paper than to not have the piece of paper. The piece of paper gives you immediate police action. Immediate police action anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, sometimes that doesn't happen, which is very, very rare, like 2% of the time. But most of the time, once you have that piece of paper, police officers get on board and they do what they have to do. I would also advise survivors that you still have to have use some other tools of trade in order to navigate, because each perpetrator is different, right? If your perpetrator is stalking you, take off the location off of your phone. Don't have the social media presence of posting where you are. I'm having food at Jenny's. I am down in the mall and wonderful world. And so, because guess what? The perpetrator could have access to that said social media. I know you may feel as though your life is restricted, but it might be restricted for a period of time to secure your safety. I would also say, if you go wherever you're going, make sure and tell someone you are going X. If you know you have a child in common with this perpetrator and that perpetrator is violent to you anywhere, you could suggest that the child is collected opposite the police station. You don't have to be in the police station, because I don't really like children going to the police station, but in some circumstances where the perpetrator is that violent, you have no choice but to exchange the child at the police station. And of course, I would choose a police station where there's a yard or there's a play park across, like Marabella police station across the road. I think there's a Mario's or something like that. So it's in close proximity, and exchange the child where there are cameras, or you can have a third party collect the child, or you could do the collection after school. So he could collect the child on Friday after school and drop them back in school on Monday, so that there is limited contact between you and the perpetrator. So those are my quick tips for survivors after you get your protection order. And remember, your protection order could be for within 3 years, right? And if you get a protection order for 2 years and the perpetrator is acting up, you can go back to the court and get it extended for a further year. But if you have gotten the max of the protection order, you would have to make a new application. So you make your reports and then you go back to the court. So remember, first point, make reports. Anything happen, make report. Journal, you have your smartphone, email events to yourself so that it's very easy when you come to the attorney for the assistance, because you might have a way, some persons might have a way of blotting out traumatic events. So sometimes they don't remember. So that's why you always have to have a buddy, because I have many survivors when they come and they give me, and then they bring a friend and the friend said, you don't remember when you went in the hospital for this? And when you went to do this, and they completely forgot something as traumatic as that. So that's why I would always tell persons to journal and don't keep these things that the perpetrator could have access to. There's a virtual space, email it, create 2 email addresses, email it to a random email so that, you know, keep all your documents, important documents, at a safe location, on your work, by parents, by a good friend. Because if it's at home, especially for migrant women, they destroy your passport, they do things, they rip up your work permits. So, you know, so try your best and only keep copies at home if you have a perpetrator who exhibit those types of behaviors.
Thank you, Danielle. My second question is for Elisha. Are victims still forced to sit or stand next to their abusers in court or in closed rooms with their abusers while sharing details?
There are certain provisions where an attorney can ask for leave of the court for a separation screen that is typically used in sexual assault matters. Domestic violence matters not as much. However, there are times when the protection order has been attempted to be made, as we say, without notice as well. There have been times where protection orders have also been able to be procured by certain women, separate and apart from the Domestic Violence Act. Then it doesn't really become a protection order. It's almost, as we like to say, an injunction or a restraining order of the High Court, where you don't want someone to enter your premises or be in your space. But there have been times when I have seen attorneys request that there be a screen or a separation. However, with the virtual space now for a domestic violence hearing, the hearing of a protection order, it removes that element of face-to-face. But in 90% of the cases, you do have that element of having to be present in court. The respondent to the protection order has to be cross-examined by the attorney at law as well if he contests the protection order, if he or she contests the protection order being granted against the applicant. So that is also a hurdle, I guess, we would still have to cross if sexual assault is not involved. But the virtual scape of court being online now does make it a bit better that you don't have to be in the same room because you won't be there. Hope that answers the question.
So that's, thank you, Alicia. And lastly, this one is for Ganesh. Is there any assistance for a victim who wishes to have their names and identity changed without having to wait for a long period of time?
If there is any assistance for their names to be changed?
Yes.
I don't know, Daniel, do you want to answer this? I am not sure, to be honest. She seems to be
there are certain instances where victims, the survivors' names are changed, and I would say virtual complainants when there's a court matter and it's a very serious case. I remember I had a survivor who survived her husband shoving a screwdriver down her throat. She had 4 minor children. She migrated to Canada and her name was changed. and the 2 children, she was only able to carry 2 children. Her parents took the other 2, the older 2. And she carries a new name, and it was as a result of her escaping her perpetrator. So there are, I know with respect to children that have suffered severe sexual assault at the hand of a parent, and I guess the mommy would also be a victim. There are applications that you can make to have the child's name changed, but of course you have to have the psychosocial support of reports and so explaining why. And this is off topic, but of course persons who their perpetrator is in jail, cannot access bail, but has a long arm. And I have seen 2 instances where the mother and children, then the mommy could change her name via deed poll, but you have to get leave of the court to change the children's name. That's, yeah, but it's very, very rare those things happen, and they are gag proceedings, of course, because of the sensitive nature of those proceedings, closed.
Okay, thank you both so much. We will have to wrap there because of time. And we will try to find a way to respond to the other questions that were asked. But of course, if folks have more questions that they need responses to in relation to domestic violence and different groups of vulnerable women, they could always reach out to either of the organizations represented here and other organizations who continue to work with people who are survivors of domestic violence. Thank you to our panelists for sharing with us today. Thank you for the work that you continue to do in Trinidad and Tobago for different vulnerable groups of people, especially in relation to domestic violence. And we look forward to continuing the good work that is being done and to continuing to advocate for a more robust and comprehensive protection and response mechanism in the country to domestic violence. Just a little about CAISO and Wholeness and Justice. Wholeness and Justice is a program that's been established by CAISO to respond to violations experienced by LGBTQI+ persons in Trinidad and Tobago. And like Daniel said, we do this through a three-prong approach, really, which is by providing legal support to these people, clinical support through psychosocial and therapeutic interventions, and wholeness development support. And well, if you have any questions in relation to LGBTQI+ person who's experienced violence, or if you just want to know more about what we do, you could always reach out to us. Same goes for WINAD and Living Water community, especially in relation to migrant women and people who who need that kind of legal support, as well as psychosocial work, as they mentioned that they do. We will share their contact information in the chat shortly. And yeah, so thank you all for being here. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
Sorry, Kalak, I'm giving a shout out to our team. So as we're wrapping up, I also want to, have us see our team. We are led by Kellogg, who is our program and research officer, Danielle, our community lawyer, Ray, our community caseworker, Akila, our community therapist, and Elron and I from the board of CAISO who offer support. So we just want to say that having this event too is about our referral partner system, working with Living Water, working with WINAD and working with CADV as well, and other stakeholders, that we will continue to do this kind of education process. And please, just as a quick reminder, follow us. This is our plug. Follow us on socials, get in touch with us. And if you want to know more about our work, and if we can please share in the chat of each of our panelists, if you want to go ahead and put in your any socials or website for our participants here to share. And of course, we need to give a huge shout out to our interpreters today. Kellogg, if I'm forgetting anything, Thank you so much to Selena, and thank you so much to Joanna. And I want to highlight that Selena is a deaf sign interpreter and how important it is for us to support deaf sign language interpreters. And then that requires having a team of interpreters. So shout out to our team. Huge thanks to Kellogg and the rest of our Wholeness and Justice team. Thanks to Shanare, who is our tech person in the background. And thank you so much to each of our panelists for being here and joining us today. And again, you will see in the chat to learn more about WINAD, to learn more about Living Water and CADV, and of course, Wholeness and Justice. We invite you, please, to keep in touch. And Kellogg and I were saying that we will, some of the questions that we didn't quite get to, although most of them were answered in the discussion, we will certainly put out some more information based on this amazing panel discussion. Thank you all so much. Happy International Women's Day. And as a reminder and plug, when we say women, we mean all women, queer women, bisexual women, trans women, women with disabilities, women across migrants, and women across all economic and social and geographic backgrounds. So we thank you so much. Kellogg, anything else?
No, that's it from me. Thank you all so much for being here.